Are you using your own microphone?
I am not.
No.
I mean, I am, but I'm not.
Okay.
So, so this would be.
You're sorry.
Yeah, no, I just record my stuff, so
Oh, yeah. All the extra stuff?
yeah.
Okay. And I have the microphone off right now on my
We'll get started in about 15 minutes here, so enjoy your morning break and visiting with each other, and I'm sure you know that.
You know what? Which is, yeah, we won't even worry about it.
Okay,
And if they come up,
so I'll leave it black. If it notices it comes up, if you hit show hide picture, it'll appear on the screen.
okay. Good, thank you.
Okay.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me okay? Can you guys hear me after that? Okay, great, wonderful. All right. Welcome, TriCap. It's all staff day. Awesome. I like that. Even this early in the morning, you guys must have had your coffee, and your cinnamon rolls, and your caramel rolls, and your fruit. So I'm glad to see that you're full of energy. We are going to have a rewarding and inspiring and fun day today, full of learning and connecting. So I want to welcome you. Everybody has signed in. Everybody has their tables, their folders. I just want to point out in your folders, you have an agenda on the right side of your folder, which will tell you what we're doing today and kind of our timeline for everything. There is a change. Of course there's a change, right? Everything always changes. We will not be having outdoor fire extinguisher training today. Because I think Mother Nature would take care of that for us on its own, right? So never fear, we have a backup plan. And so we'll be doing another fun activity during that period of time this morning. So don't fret about that. Restrooms outside the back doors where you came in, down the hall around the corner. Let's see what else. We will be having a wonderful lunch buffet. We'll be having some afternoon treats. Water and coffee will remain in the back this morning. There is decaf, hot water. I think that you won't go home hungry today, I promise. And I'd like to introduce our all-staff committee. They're at the back table. Eileen, Janelle, Jared, Mac, and in absentia Doris, Washington. So you can look for these groovy shirts. If you have any questions, we are wearing those. And the reason that we have these shirts on is, I just want to point out, we're talking about diversity today, and we're talking about how there's all kinds of differences, right, in our communities and in our staff. But we put them all together when we're working with our clients and with our communities. And what that creates is this really awesome tie-dye of services and perspective and people. So that's kind of where that's coming from, just keep in mind. And this afternoon, we will be pulling us all together for a wonderful photo opportunity to celebrate those differences in the work that we do. The other piece that we're going to be doing today is celebrating. So that's why you see balloons and noisemakers and all kinds of fun stuff like that, because we're going to celebrate the impact that TriCap has. We're going to celebrate the impact that Community Action has. We're going to celebrate the impact that each and every one of you have on our communities. We have a mission. That's what ties us all together. So I want to hear how you're going to celebrate today, because we're going to have lots of opportunities to do that. So we have some helpers up front that are going to remind us when it's time to celebrate. So why don't you guys show us what that's going to look like, and get your noisemakers out and get your applause in. Yes. So the studio audience, that's what you do when it's time to celebrate, okay? Applause. And we are going to be having some staff read stories. I'm actually going to have a few of them come up right away this morning before we get started with our guest speaker. Jean and Amy and Steve, if you wouldn't mind coming up. We are going to be having staff throughout the day read stories of success. You can find them in a fancy little booklet that the administrative services staff sweated and fretted over for the last several days. They called it Michelle's sweatshop in their office for a while. We are going to celebrate stories, real stories about how TriCap staff make an impact on our clients and on our communities. So, Steve, would you be willing to start?
Sure. Well, this is just a really short impact story, and I'm in the Energy Advisor Program. I don't know if a lot of you know what that is, but it's through Energy Assistance, and we work a lot with weatherization folks, and we go out and look at people's homes to try to figure out how to reduce their energy burden. That's what my job is. So sometimes as an energy advisor, I fall into a routine. I see one new family every day and check out their home or mobile homes for ways to help them with their energy burden, referring them to one or more of TriCap's programs. And we have about 12 programs, so there's a lot to choose from. The work keeps me so occupied with the demands of actually doing the job that I sometimes lose sight of the impact on our clients. This week, one of my ladies shared that she had received her brand new water heater, and it's the first time that I've had hot water in more than a year. And that kind of impacted me. Her sincere thank you caused me to pause for a moment and reflect on what it is that we all really do. And I put myself in her place. And when you think about it, a warm house in the winter, a hot bath, being able to flip on a switch and cook a meal may all seem really pretty basic. And we know a lot of us don't even think about those things. That is, unless you are forced by circumstances to go without these essentials. My client's thank you reminded me, and it refreshed me, and it refocused my thoughts on why I go to work every day. So if what we do is routine, it's a pretty good routine to get into. Thank you.
I'm Amy. I haven't been here long, so some of you probably don't even know who I am, but I'm working as a self-sufficiency counselor, and in this particular story is from our long-term homeless program. And names are changed, so don't be alarmed, worried when I'm using names. I first met Ginny and her husband Roger while they were living at a local motel that's known for housing homeless folks and has a lot of drug activity, that kind of thing. Ginny became homeless when the apartment she was living in was sold, and they evicted all the residents in the buildings. And it was later closed by the owners. Ginny and her two daughters, who were aged 12 and 16 at the time, were not able to find new housing because Jenny had an eviction on the record from when she lived in Florida, where she was fleeing violence. That's how she came to Minnesota. They were paying $267 a week for a one-room motel room. And that's enough, we all know that's enough to pay for an apartment. So during this time, she met a man named Roger. And Roger was also homeless. So they ended up getting married, and it was her and Roger, the two girls, and his kids, all in this room. The girls were doing their homework in the bathroom because it was the only room that had a light in it. One of their daughters actually attempted suicide at one point during their journey. But they signed up for our program, and we were, because both of them were working jobs. They had full-time minimum wage jobs. Both of them were working second jobs. But they had so many of them that, and with her background, they couldn't get into an apartment. We were able to help them find a house that didn't screen her background, and they were able to move in and convert to self-supporting. So they're now happily living in St. Cloud with their kids. The kids have gotten counseling. Their mental health has improved. At one point, they worked both parties worked at a local college, and their work therefore was seasonal. It would come and it would go. So at one point, they did qualify for a subsidy and got a couple of months of help from us financially. And then they went back over income again. But that's good news to me, is they're over income, they're making their own way. They're still on my caseload. I still see them, every couple of weeks, and they're doing great. So that's my story.
Well, good morning. Welcome to my hometown and my alma mater. I'm Koen Taylor. I'm I'm the administrative assistant over in the main building, but I do come over to Trans once in a while to play with the tokens. I like to count the tokens. This is our story from the administration department. TRICAP's administration department identified an opportunity to provide a work environment for people striving for employment. We welcomed a participant into this program who came to work in our agency at the front desk as a receptionist. She was referred to TRICAP from functional industries where she was working with a job coach to help her find a job she was able to do with some physical restrictions. She was given the opportunity to try to work at the reception desk and with actual practice, determine the amount of time she could tolerate sitting versus standing. Taking what she learned working as a reception desk for nearly a month, she was able to transition to work in the transportation department for 6 months as a temporary staff doing administrative duties. When her assignment was done with TRICAP, she was able to continue working with the temporary agency to find comparable work with what she was physically able to do. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. We're going to hear stories like this all day today. And I think it's important that we are able to reflect on this, because sometimes our work is hard, right? And sometimes we lose sight of the big picture and our mission. And so this is a great reminder. And Amy, where are you? Thank you for reminding me. I forgot to do something. How many of you have never been to an all-staff before? Please stand up. Since last year, these are some new staff that we've had join TRICAP. Welcome. Wonderful. Okay, so we are going to move through our agenda, and our next speaker is our illustrious leader to get us set for the day. Lori, come on up.
Good morning, everybody. I think we need to practice applauding and cheering and do a shout out to the all staff committee because it is going to be a great day today. So let's thank them. I am glad that each and every one of you are here today. So Michelle asked me to talk for a few minutes from my perspective in the role that I play at TriCap about impact and success. And I had to think about that. I thought, gosh, what am I going to talk about? Because lots of you are going to get up and tell awesome stories about the experiences that you have being on the bus, being a self-sufficiency counselor, being a tax manager, a dispatch worker, administrative services person. You all have such great stories, and I'm so excited to listen to them today. So I thought, okay, well, let's think about theme. Let's think about community action and what impact it has. And I couldn't come up with just one thing, so I have a list. It's kind of a long one, but it won't take all morning. First thing I thought of is impact on the people we serve and their families. So last year, TriCap served over 19,000 people. 19,000 people. Woo! That's right. So what does that mean? You know, what's the impact of serving 19,000 people? Well, people's basic needs are being met. They're getting where they need to go through public transit. They are getting money back from their tax returns through the tax program to help them pay their basic needs. They have health insurance. They have a warm home due to energy assistance, or maybe their home got weatherized. They have better self-esteem or more self-esteem because they're working on career development and they feel like they're making an impact. What effect did it have on their families? Well, children of families that we serve have parents that aren't so stressed because they're able to provide for their children and be the best parent they can be. Parents of adult children who may need to take care of them have some respite because we're getting them to a work site through our transportation program or whatever it may be, and it takes some of the burdens off them. Adult children of parents feel relieved because they know their elderly mom or dad has the heating that they need for their house. They have the food that they need to nourish their bodies. And so there are many different ways that we impact people and their families. And how do I know that? Well, I listen to all of you, but we receive letters. We receive so many different letters from people that are so grateful for the services that we provide. I can think of one letter in particular where an elderly woman wrote to me to thank me for the energy assistance grant that they had received. Between the energy assistance grant, what she told me, and the food that they had saved from the garden that they still had, this woman was in her 80s, by the way, they felt they had enough to make it through the rest of the winter, and what an impact that was. That's just amazing. What other impacts? Impact on the partners in the industry that we work with. So other partners of organizations that do good work can carry out their mission and do what they do best because they can count on TriCap to be able to provide the services that we do. Companies such as Wacosa, their goal is to help people with developmental disabilities. We help them by providing transportation to get many of their clients to and from their work sites every day. The different counties that we serve, Sherburne County, Benton County, Stearns County, Morrison County, we provide information, referral, we provide advocacy, we provide application assistance so that when people are ready to get out to the county, they know what they need to bring, and it makes those financial workers and social workers' jobs much easier. How do we know this, or how do I know this? The ongoing contracts and new partnerships that are being developed every day with different entities within the community. And there's impact on each other. Hopefully you feel that you work in a supported work environment where you have friends among you that you can talk to, that you can, if you're having a bad day and, or you have just a humdinger of a situation with a client, or a bus broke down, or two volunteer drivers were in the wrong city at the wrong time, you've got your coworkers that you can rely on. Also, that you have an agency that you feel supported by your supervisor, and opportunities for growth, learning, training, everything that makes us to be the best we can be. Then there's the impact on the community. Think about this. What does TriCap have for the impact of the community? A number of different things. There are neighborhoods without blighted properties, right? There are landlords that are thriving because they're able to meet their business needs because we're assisting them in terms of helping people with rental assistance. There are groups that are happening all over in our different communities through our assistance to tackle the social problems that are happening within our community. And people get where they need to be. So if they need to get to the grocery store, or they need to get to the beauty shop, or a medical appointment, wherever it may be, community members are thriving because they have the transportation services that they need. Now, this next impact I'm going to talk about isn't one that we talk about a lot. And over the last year, I've really made a concentrated effort of going out to the different community groups and talking about the economic impact that TriCap has on our communities. So in your folder is a great economic impact report, and I want to give a couple kudos here to Lisa Drew, first of all, because Lisa and I started talking about this about a year and a half ago. Oh gosh, how can we tell the other side of the story about TriCap and the impact that we have? And she masterminded this economic impact report, and she got a lot of help from our illustrious fiscal director, Angie Leeser, who helped her crunch those numbers and put it together. So let's take a look at this and let this sink in a little bit. So again, I want to say, when I go out and do presentations, of course, I always talk about what the mission of TriCap is and how we help people. And most people in the community, that's what they know us for, right? We're about helping people. So I always talk about that first, because that is first and foremost the most important thing that we do. And then I slide this information in about the economic impact. So last year, for example, through the services that TriCap provided within the 4 counties, in the energy assistance area alone, $3.9 million came back into our communities to the local energy vendors. Could be Excel, could be Centerpoint, could be the large ones, but it's also those small mom and pop shops that you see out in the rural areas that are selling the propane and the oil. That was an economic impact to those businesses, $3.9 million. Funds generated by the tax preparation program. So last year, I think we served over 2,000 households in the tax assistance program. $3.3 million in tax returns came back to our clientele who use those services that more than likely use that money in the local community to boost the economy. Our weatherization contract. So we have contractors that go out and do the weatherization services in the homes. These are local contractors. $661,864 was paid out to local contractors that then help them sustain their families. And I'm not going to go through all of them, but as you look down the lines, everything from the bus services that we have all local vendors that we use to fix our buses. We fill our buses up with gas at all local vendors. We have many different furnace replacement, repair contractors, plumbers. These are all people that need to make a living. And through the services that we provide, helping people in need, we're also helping the general community. So when you add that all up, over $9 million was last year went back into the community because of the services that TriCap operates. When I tell that to people, they're just astonished. They're just like, especially like economic development people, I'll go to the workforce boards and you can see their eyes are getting bigger and bigger as we talk about the numbers. And it's important because we do so much at TriCap. And it's important for you to all to remember the impact that you have, not only on the people you serve, but our community partners, one another, as well as the economy. So there's another way we have an impact. And this is, I'm gonna use this one as last, but it's certainly not the most important. And that is the impact that we have on our policymakers. Our policymakers at a federal, state, and local level are very important to the existence of our organization. I tell people we're a grants management organization. They say, Lori, what does that mean? That means we rely on those federal and state grants to keep our doors open. Because without those grants, we're not going to be in business. And then there's 19,000 people that might not get served. And so the impact that we have with our legislators is they are able to be well educated about who TriCap is, what we do, what kind of struggles we're facing in the community. There are cheerleaders, there are advocates when they're at the state capitol or at the national capitol, and there's talks about money here and there. They have to be our advocates, and so we have to work very hard at educating them on the importance of what we do and why it's so important that we have that funding. How do I know we make an impact with our lawmakers? When we go and visit the Capitol, they will see community action agencies and they smile, they know us. They talk about the good work that we do. They get calls from their constituents, people that are in need, and they usually know, I'm gonna have them refer them over to TriCap. I know someone over at TriCap can help them. They come over to our agency. Some of you might have saw, we had some legislators out this week, and they're just astonished at everything we can do with the workforce that we have and the impact that we have. And so they are vital to the impact and the success of our organization as well. So you put all those things together, and that equals a whole lot of impact with a whole lot of success. And we can't do it without each and every one of you. You're all a part of that. So again, thank you. So give yourself an applause for that. Okay. So speaking of policymakers, so we in community action receive these federal and state grants and all that great stuff. We've got people at a national and a state level that work for us to do that through lobbying. Now, lobbying is not something we can do with our grant money. However, there are avenues that we can support the people like David Bradley in Washington, D.C., who is fighting for community action programs, and he has been since the 1960s. One of the ways we do that is through our Power Action Leadership. In your folder, you have a Power Action Leadership donation request. Now, I'm up here on behalf of the Legislative Advocacy Committee, which currently is comprised of Jack Edmonds, Simon Phelan, Teresa, and I. And we are going to do something fun today. So, some of you may or may not know, the PAL funds are funds that we raise through donations, employee contributions. We do fun things throughout the year that gets money to help pay our lobbyists at a federal and state level. And one of the things you can do is we can do payroll deductions. I don't know how many people knew you can do a payroll deduction for the PAL fund in the organization. Raise your hand. Okay, all right. You can. You can give a one-time, or you can have $1 taken out of every paycheck if you so choose. So we have for you today, so let me go back and say, this is what we use the PAL funds for. We use them to support our federal and state legislators. We also can use them to host local events with our local legislators. We use it to provide education around voter education, registration. So we use it in many different ways, all with the impact of making sure that our policymakers are educated about what we do and why it's so important that the funds are available to do it. So we would like to have a little promotion today. We have a challenge. So at lunchtime, Simon is going to have a bucket and raffle tickets, different from the raffle tickets that you got this morning. If anyone is willing to donate today through payroll deduction or increase their payroll deduction, you can fill out this form on your lunch break on unpaid time. And very important that I say that. And give it to Simon at lunch break, okay? Anybody who does that, her names are gonna go, their raffle is gonna go in a bucket. And we have two $25 Walmart gift cards to give away today. So your name will be put in the bucket to win those. So if it's something that you want to do, you don't have to do it. Please feel free to do so. Even $1 counts. So give what you can if you can. We really appreciate it. So thank you again. Have a good day today. Practice celebrating. All right. And I'm going to let Jared come up.
Thank you very much. Is everyone excited to be here today? That's not good enough. That's not good enough. Can I get a little bit more excitement? That's what I'm talking about right there. Now, can I have Vicky and Juan up here, please? For our story, Vicky and Juan. Please join me up to the front, please. No, I'm not. Okay, you know Spanish? You know everything in Spanish?
My English is kind of rusty, but I don't speak Spanish or something.
Okay. Awesome. So we will let you go first. Wow. For your story.
I'm gonna cry.
Success story.
I have to read it. I don't like the script, no.
It's in English.
The Painesville School Bus Company canceled transportation services for the preschool program. And TriCap stepped in and was able to provide transportation for these families. We received a call from the mom of a preschooler. Her name is Maggie. She's a very nice girl. She can hardly keep the pool box. The first box, the first time she tried to put it on the floor, and now she gives me the token and I put it inside. She's very sweet. And the thing is that when I use the driver about maybe 3 blocks, and as soon as she goes into the bus, she goes to the back and she sleeps. So when I hit the place that I have to leave her, the person that takes care of the house has to go inside the bus, don't bring her out because I call her the sleeping beauty. Her name is Maggie, and that's why I think she thinks that we have a lot of patience, but it's nothing, So one day I was told that they called TriCap and they asked for who drives her, and my name came out, and Mom and her this. Also gave me a gold watch. No, I was telling Wanda that I will keep this for at least 20 years. And when she becomes the governor of Minnesota, I will go and keep the door.
I'm with outreach, I serve the Starnes County and Morrison County, and my story is also in Painesville. My response to the Painesville fire shows the success of TriCap outreach plan. I was on the scene representing TriCap immediately after an apartment fire, and I was able to provide access to TriCap services along with referrals to community partners. However, after the initial meeting, I received calls and met with residents and individuals. At my next food shelf appointment in Thanesville, food shelf workers informed me that several residents from the fire was accessing TriCap services. And now this is what I call a great success story. Thank you.
I am going to go off script a bit. The story that I was supposed to read is in the little flip book about Coppermouth River. But I just received a call yesterday from a woman whose sister was using our services in Little Falls. She called inquiring whether or not we serve the Peters area with our bus service. And I had to inform her that really we don't go out there on a regular basis, we're out there once a week. And so she's like, yeah, that's kind of what I thought. I thought I would ask. You know, we really hated to move my sister out of Little Falls because of the service that they provided for transportation. We relied on it so much, and our drivers were so good to our sister. So then she just wanted to call and thank us for that service that we provided for her.
We're supposed to cry. Now, our next performer is a cultural competency. His name is Koen. He's an energetic presenter, a powerful communicator, a dynamic teacher. His education influenced North America continent. Andre integrates his ability as an improvisational comedian, a large group facilitator, keynote speaker, classroom teacher to captivate and educate his audience. There's many words to describe and define Mr. Andre Koen. He's an educator, he's a student, a comedian, a speaker, a activist, facilitator, coach, mentee, mentor, leader, team member, community organizer, diversity trainer, motivator, friend, and son. The most representative, however, is Mr. Andre Koen with his enkindled spirit. Please welcome Mr. Andre Koen, president and founder of AM Horizon.
So let me make sure this microphone is on. I took it off because I went to the restroom and I did not want any accidents. Right? So I want to say thank you so much for inviting me. Some of the stuff that we'll talk about. Actually, I left my notes on there. I got so excited. I left my notes. So our world is in turmoil. Our world is in turmoil. And it is easy for us to get into a place where we lose sight of what we're about. So I am on the board of ACAP, Anoka County Community Action Program. I am the secretary there. So I understand your struggles and I understand what we're up against because we have a common enemy, which is ignorance and poverty. And I believe that those two things are linked together on purpose, but we'll talk about that later. I am probably the most unlikely person to be standing on this stage talking to you, given where I have come from. I'm not supposed to be here if you look at statistics. I would imagine that for many of you, there are reasons and rationales that you probably should not be where you are, but you are. And you're mostly there because someone stepped in the gap for you. One of the things that I'm probably most proud about is, and it really shocked me, right? So when I was working for Anoka County, I was appointed to this ACAP board. And I was like, ACAP, what is that? You know, what's community action, right? I was like, I don't know anything about community action. And so we're sitting in a meeting in one of my early meetings, And they started talking about this program that educates elementary and pre-elementary age children. They started talking about this program. And I was like, that sounds kind of familiar, right? So I'm talking to my mom and I'm telling her about how, how proud she should be of my accomplishment of being on this board, right? I was appointed by, elected officials to be a part of this board, and how, how great and grandiose this is, right? And so, and she said, tell me more about that program. And I said, well, we take poor kids and we educate them so they can be caught up with their peers. We take poor kids, poor ones, and we teach them, right? And so I said this stuff, and she said, that's funny, because you were one of those poor kids. I said, what? I was in Head Start. Now, here's the funny thing about me being in Head Start. People say, well, did Head Start help you? Did it change you? Did it give you a hand up or a leg up? I can't answer that question because it's been so profound that I don't know an existence without it. And so one of the things we have to remember is that we're not just delivering services. And I think, I forgot who said that if it's routine, it's a routine I want to have, right? Yeah. If I'm doing good is what I want to do, is what I want to have. And so being in front of you is an honor and a privilege, because had it not been for folks like you who committed to helping my parents, give them a hand up when they needed it, I wouldn't be here today. And I was talking with our Head Start director about how I can get my daughter in, right? No, you can't get her in. There's some other stuff going on, but you can't eat. And I'm like, can we just fake it? Because the training is so good. And so our world is in turmoil. And I think it's in turmoil because we've forgotten some very important things about what it means to be human. Right? And I miss the days of the great communicators. I miss the days of the great communicators. Ronald Reagan was a great communicator. Barack Obama was a great communicator, kind of laid it out there for folks, right? And our current president doesn't necessarily have that skill, but if you listen, you may be able to hear some things. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the why diversity and why this kind of rainbow coalition of colors are important things to talk about, because it helps us focus on what's important. Helps us focus on what's important. So does everyone have a handout? Let me make sure everybody has a handout. Looks like this. Yep. So if you can open that up, and you will see I've numbered this so we can orientate ourselves through this particular handout. The number 1, the number 2, and the number 3. And we're going to start with number 3, which is right in the center of your handout, right? So number 3. So 1, 2, 3. And you'll see that there are 5 gray circles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 gray circles. What I want you to do is I want you to write one thing that you value or that is important to you in each one of those circles. Write down one thing that is of value to you or important to you in each one of those circles. And if you don't have a pen, there should be a writing utensil right on the paper. So I'll give you just, and it could be a place like Belize or Bemidji. It could be a concept like freedom or justice. It could be a person, a significant other, or a grandchild. One thing that you value or that is important to you in each one of those gray circles. One thing that you value in each of those circles. person, the thing, the concept, the place. All right, it looks like most people have 4, if not all 5, so we'll go ahead and start. What I like to do is play a game, and the game is very simple. What I want you to do is to find a minimum of 2 people for each one of your circles, and I want you to find people who can sign on things that they either share that are similar to what you have on your paper, or that they really think is a great idea. They're like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. So I want you to get 2 signatures for each circle. If you get a minimum of 2 signatures for each circle, how many signatures do you end up with? So 2, that's right, a minimum of 10 signatures, all right? You have 90 seconds to do that, starting now. 60 seconds. Yeah. 45 seconds. Five, four, 3, 2, 1. Game over. Game over. All right. So please count up your signatures. Was there anyone who had, if you can hear my voice, clap once. If you can hear my voice, clap twice. If you can hear my voice, clap 3 times. Great job. Great job. She asked if I learned that at Head Start. Yeah, I did. So I have to be honest. A number of the activities and things that we do are the things that I used to do when I taught middle school and high school. So if it sounds or looks familiar, that's because of my training. And as such, there's not much you can throw at me that I already haven't dealt with, right? So great. Now, did everyone at least get one signature on your paper? Did everybody at least get one signature? All right, cool. So as you were walking around the room, were there things that you saw on other people's papers and you were like, man, why didn't I think of that? I should have wrote that down. What were some of those things? I see a lot of head nodding. What were some of those things that you saw? Education, health. Oh, they both said it at the same time. Community. What was that? Plumbing. Oh, family. In my house, plumbing and family go along. I mean, they go along. So what's that? You saw dogs. Okay, cool. But and cats, pets. Yeah. So were there? So it's obvious that people are able to make those connections, and you saw things on other people's paper. Was there anyone who had at least 7 signatures? Raise your hand if you had 7 signatures. All right, cool. Anyone get to 10? Anyone get to 10? All right, cool. Any overachievers who got more than 10? All right, cool. What did you get? How many? 16. She's a winner. Cool. So it was obvious that you're able to find those connections. Were there some connections that were more difficult to find people to sign on, or you actually did not find anyone to sign on one of your circles? All right. What was one of those in the back? Home. Please raise your hand if you value home, yours or someone else's. Please, if that's a value, having a home, being in a home. Okay, cool. So another hand in the back. Yes. Self. Please raise your hand if you value yourself. One more. There was one.
I had to run across the room to get mine. I have Texas is important to me, and the only other person from Texas is Jared.
And actually, you guys can keep that to yourself. I'm just kidding. No, we love Texas. We love it.
It's a great place to be from.
Oh, she said it's a great place to be from. Yeah. Kind of like Ohio for me. I'm from there. So cool. So, all right. Why do you think I would do this activity at the beginning of a session? Like, what's the point? It's pretty obvious, right? What the point is? What's the point?
We value the same things.
That we value the same things? And different things, right? So one of the things I'd like for you to do somewhere on your piece of paper is I want you to write down a new definition of diversity. A new definition of diversity. What I found is if you ask 1,000 people what diversity is, how many answers do you think you get? 1,001, right? So we don't really have a good sense of this, but I want you to write this down as a new definition. That diversity is the recognition of our commonalities and our differences. It's the recognition of both of those things, right? And a lot of times, I know that I participated in trainings where they focused on one of those aspects, but never both in concert. So I come to bring balance to the force. Okay, Star Wars people got it. So it's important to recognize that. And so when we're in our communities, because why is that an important distinction to make about this diversity stuff? That it is our commonalities and our differences that I should be accounting for. Why is that important? Because most people just see differences. And we're not most people. right? We have a different kind of charge. Why else?
Because if we can find the commonalities, we can get along and we can figure out how to work together.
We can figure out how to work together. One of the things, and I'm not touting this as a great thing, but as a thing to recognize, is that World War II made us think about what was important to us. Set aside a bunch of stuff so we could focus on what was important to us. And so somewhere along the way, we've lost that. We focus so much on either differences or commonalities that we haven't been able to see. And the other thing to recognize is, but for the grace of God and choices and luck, many of us could be on the other side of the table that we operate from. Right? And I know that for me, it's 4 paychecks. Don't get 4 paychecks, I'm in trouble. Although I do know that I have a 6-month lag on my mortgage, so I can, if I get, it's just, but y'all know, people who play those games, right? I mean, and it's not necessarily they're playing games, but they know how systems work, right? They figured out how systems work. So diversity is about our commonalities and our differences. And so when we can see those, we can look past some of those things and ask, what is it that humans want? What do they need? And so I want to talk a little bit about some of the truths about human beings, what motivates human beings. So if we go back to number 1 on that same part of the handout, the first truth about human beings is that we can learn, change, and grow. We can learn, change, and grow, even if we don't see evidence of that growth. Anyone garden or been in agriculture at all? Been around farms, garden? Okay. Some of you need to get out and nature's your friend. Okay. Yeah. So those gardeners, those farmers, those folks who work the land. Once you plant a seed, do you go back and check it every 15 minutes? No, you don't. That's not a best practice, right? Why is that? Why don't you go back and check it every 15 minutes? Because change takes time. It takes time. Why else don't you? I mean, give all things considered, it's got sunlight, it gets watered. Why else don't you keep going back to check on it every 15 minutes?
Got other things to do.
You got other things to do, right? You have other things to do. The process takes time, and you trust the process. You trust the process. And so sometimes when we're doing human development or we're saying that we're giving a hand up to folks, they don't get it the first time. They don't get it the second time. But at some point, they get it. And so we have to be there, being the consistent hand up until they finally get it. Next is that people do what they think works, even when what? Even when it doesn't work. But why do they keep doing things if it's not producing results? Because of habit, because of coping. They're a slow learner. They don't know a different way. Because it worked in the past. It worked in the past. And so if it worked in the past, well, what is the natural inclination of human beings? If it's worked in the past, it should work now, right? I mean, anyone ever seen kids fall out in a grocery store or in a big box store, right? Do you think that's the kid's first time falling out? Probably not, right? But they realize it worked before, so it should work now. Our county jails are full of criminals who haven't recognized this principle. And why are many of them, and I love it when con men get locked up. Love it. Have no sympathy for them, right? Love it. Enjoy it, right? Why do con men get caught? What's that? They make a mistake. Usually something changes. And so people do what they think works even when it doesn't work because they haven't realized that something has changed. I know families, and I know people who used to call Brazil nuts by another name. Some of you know what it, no? Okay, all right, cool. Now, don't act like I don't know that you know. It ain't no secret. Yeah, and so for those of you who don't know, for some of you are like, just, they're like really young. I can smell the Similac coming off of them. Who don't know what I'm talking about? Brazil nuts are these kind of orange wedge-shaped nuts that have a real hard mahogany outside, and people used to refer to them as nigger toes. Now, I don't know who came up with that. I don't know if they were podiatrists or what. How do you equate those things? But interestingly enough, we never called them that in my family. Why that? Right? But there are people who still try to use those terms and still try to address people in those ways. And what they have failed to realize is that times have changed. Times have changed. So next is that all human behavior is goal-directed, and we'll talk about that in just a second. And that attitude is a reaction to a goal. Anyone ever encountered someone with an attitude? Some of y'all look like y'all got attitudes right now. Right? So attitude. So what have you been told about or taught that an attitude is? What is an attitude? It's a reaction. The way you carry yourself. Yes.
It's a pattern.
It's a pattern. All right, cool. All of you guys are really smart and you gave really good answers. And those answers would have been inadequate for my parents. My parents graduated from a place called Old School. And I used to ask them, where's your diploma from Old School? Like, what's the address to Old School? Because they'd always say, I'm old school, all this kind of stuff. But inadequate, because my parents would say just bizarre stuff to my siblings and I when we didn't have the right attitude. Like my dad would say, boy, you better fix your face. And so I would. But that's not what he meant. So he sent me to my room. Right? And I'll never forget, my mother said something that was really interesting. She said, boy, go to your room till you learn how to act. Change your attitude. So I went to my room and I got my act together. So I opened up the door, stepped into the hallway, and I said, to be or not to be. I spent a lot of time in my room. So when I thought about this idea of attitude, growing up, I wasn't really clear about it until I was 17. And when I was 17, I became extremely clear about what an attitude is. And so growing up, my dad was my pastor. And so if you hear any of that, it's not my fault, it's my dad. Right? So it's my pastor. So on Sunday, we would go to church from 7:30 a.m. to 11:30 p.m. We'd stop at 3 o'clock for chicken, not because we were black, but because chicken is delicious. So church all day on Sunday. So Friday night, I asked my dad for the car. My dad loves me. What does he say? He says, yes, he loves me. Right? So he gives me the keys. I get in the car. I pick up my friends. We're cruising for girls. I don't know what would have happened had we found girls. But I come home before curfew. I fill the car up with gas. I give my dad the keys. And he says, I have what kind of an attitude? A good attitude, a positive attitude. Right? What do I say about my dad's attitude? It's also good, right? So Friday night, my dad and I are cool. Sunday, my best friend Dexter calls me and says, Andre, can you pick me up for the movies at noon? What do I know about Sunday? Church all day. But I'm 17. I'm invincible. And Jesus is my friend too. So I go to my dad and I say, Dad, can I borrow the car? And what does my dad say? Not only does he say no, but he gives me the hell sermon. In our household, the worst consequence for anything was going to hell. And either you could go to hell on your own or my dad would show you the way. As a result of that interaction, I would say my dad had what kind of an attitude? A bad attitude. And what would he then say about my attitude? It was bad. So Friday night we're cool. Sunday, we have problems. What determines an attitude? Situations. Okay, let's bring it home. Anyone have a teenager in your life? Anyone remember being a teenager in your life? Right? So teenagers come up to an adult, or tweens come up to an adult and say, adult, I just got a call, I just got a text. Sally's having a party and it starts in 5 minutes. Can you drop me off? And the parent is like, no, you can't go to Sally's party. Your room's not clean. You know, you were fighting with your siblings, blah, 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 blah. And what happens to the kid? Right? And they go storming off, breathing all funny, walking funny, right? So, but then the parent is like, you know what? I just unloaded on this kid for no reason. Let me back up. Let me pause. Okay, so I like the family. I like the kid. You know, they can actually go to the party. I'll drop them off, pick them up. So the parent goes to the door, knocks on the door, and the monster behind us says, what are you on? And you say, you know what? I was just thinking, you can go to the party. I'll drop you off at this time. I'll pick you up at this time. We'll go do some errands and do some other things. Come on, let's go. What happens to the attitude? It changes. So what is it that determines an attitude? The goal. The goal. When you get what you want, you have a positive attitude. So when we're working with the community and they come into us with an attitude already, what does their attitude say before they speak? Before they even open their mouths, what does their bad or negative attitude indicate? They haven't gotten what they've wanted. They haven't reached a goal. Why is the alt-right upset? They've been lied to. Why is the alt-left upset? They've been lied to. What's the lie? Work hard, study, get a good education, marry, get a good job, blah, 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 blah. I don't want you to raise your hand, but I imagine that a number of us have second jobs because we've been lied to too. But the difference between us and them is that we have the recognition that we're not shaped by those external things. We are shaped by our internal motivation. That we understand that attitude is about goals. So we set more and different goals. And so when you don't have any hope, you rely on the hope that you have, which is typically the things you can see. And in those cases, and in our world's cases right now, it seems to be that people are relying on their hopes of their differences and their commonalities, as opposed to looking at goals and how we aspire to those goals. So let's go down to number 2. So I talked about all human behavior being goal-directed. Let's talk about those goals just for a second. So what are the goals of human beings? Human beings are looking for safety, significance, and belonging. Safety, significance, and belonging. Significance says that I'm a person with purpose and power. I was placed on this planet for a reason. A reason I can either discover or I decide. I have a purpose. All of our families have a purpose. And I would guarantee that if you, in whatever capacity you're working, and I love those impact stories because it gets right to the root of this. If you recognize that you're helping people get significance, safety, and belonging, you're changing lives. So significance says I'm a person with purpose and power. Belonging says that I'm allowed to be, and I am in relationships with people who understand my purpose and my power. I would imagine that the friends you've selected understand your purpose and power, oftentimes more so than your own family does. We surround ourselves with people who understand our purpose and power, belonging. And then safety is the ability to be physically, mentally, and emotionally, and spiritually safe to be in relationships with people who understand my significance. And so when we're doing that, when we're helping people get their safety, significance, and belonging, we're actually empowering them to be whole human beings. And so that's one of the things that the United States has been founded on, right? So let's look at the preamble to the Constitution. We, the people of the United States in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare and the securing of prosperity, of blessings, of liberty, sorry, don't have my glasses, of ourselves and our posterity. Do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States. The Declaration of Independence, paragraph 2. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This country guarantees that we have the ability to be whole and complete humans, not because we produce a thing, not because we look like a thing, but because we were born in this world. But have we always lived up to those great words, those great promises? We haven't. But we're constantly working towards it, right? So 1830, the Indian Removal Act of President Andrew Jackson kind of happened, and that's the moving all the Indian. It was part of the thought that if we move the Indians far enough west, what would happen to them? They would die. What else? They fall into the ocean because you just keep going west. You can't go much further, right? Yeah. And then the Dawes Act, which really was about this, the relationship that tribes had with the United States and membership into the United States. So if a Native person were to sell their land, they could then become a U.S. citizen if they sold their land. August 20th, 1920, the 19th Amendment to the Constitution is signed. And what did the 19th Amendment to the Constitution say? That women had the right to vote, right? And so we're slowly pushing this ball of justice up the hill. I neglected to say that 1863, what happened in 1863? What did Lincoln say? The Emancipation Proclamation, right? Later to be formed into the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, outlawing the economic system of slavery. Until 1924, we have the Indian Citizenship Act, where we said that there were no, that American Indians could be American citizens without any other hoops to jump through. And then the 1964 Civil Rights Act. And who was the 1964's Civil Rights Act designed to protect? What was that? Minorities, okay. What's that?
I just said it was a variety of protected classes, I guess they call it.
A variety of protected classes. And I would suggest all of us. All of us. Because at some point, well, I won't get into the changing demographics, but, and then 1978, the Freedom of Religion Act is signed, giving Native Americans the right to worship however they want, whenever they want. My wife is a Assiniboine from Montana, and I was always surprised that they celebrated the 4th of July. It seemed really interesting to me that they would celebrate, as Native people, they would celebrate the 4th of July. Not because you know, all places have the 4th of July. So that wasn't ironic, you know, that wasn't ironic. But that they would celebrate Independence Day. And I asked her great-grandmother, her grandfather, why did her great-grandfather, why did he celebrate? And he said that's the time we could celebrate and nobody would bother us, right? Because they thought they were celebrating with them, when in fact they were doing their own celebrations just so they wouldn't be bothered. Right? Interesting. And then we have the 1990s ADA Act, the Americans with Disabilities Act. And who was the ADA Act designed for? Yeah, please raise your hand if you plan on getting old. ADA is for you, right? ADA is for you. So we haven't always lived up to those great promises, but we've been struggling, we've been striving to do so. And just like any good plan, you got to keep working. You got to keep working. So let's go back to number 3. And so you put information in those gray circles, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and there's a large circle in the middle. And so let's call this the circle of all human knowledge. Okay, it's a little melodramatic, right? But let's call this the pie of all knowledge. What I want you to do is cut yourself a piece of pie the size of what you know of everything there is to know. So cut yourself a piece of pie the size of what you know of everything there is to know. Okay, so for you to be really small, okay, cool. So what kinds of things are contained in that piece of pie for you, of things you know? Your life experiences. 2 more. Things you know for sure. What's that? Your location.
Education.
In education. Faith. You know your faith, right? So those are things that you know. What I want you to do now is I want you to cut yourself a second piece of pie. And this is the size of what you are aware of that you do not know. What you know you don't know. For example, I know that I don't know Mandarin Chinese. I know that I don't know how to fly an airplane. And I also know that I should not be doing lobotomies. I found out the hard way. Right? So those are things that I know, right, that I don't know. So I want you to draw a second piece of pie for yourself. And some of you may say, well, it's the rest of the circle. I want to argue that it is quantifiable, right? Because we will have a third piece, and we'll talk about that in just a second. All right? So what are some examples of things that you are aware of that you do not know? Just give me 3. Mathematics. Please raise your hand if you know you don't know all mathematics. All right? I got some tutors in the house. All right. All right. 2 more things that you know you don't know. Yeah.
The life experience of a teenage girl.
You know you don't know the life experience of a teenage girl. All right. I got some books for you to read. John Green is a great teen writer. All right. One last thing. Yes. How long you'll live. Right? Please raise your hand if you know you don't know how long you'll live. All right. Great. So we have what we know. We have what we know we don't know. So what do you think is the rest of the pie? What we don't know, or things we're not even aware of. And in that space, write the words blind spot. Blind spot. All right? And outside of that, write the word paradigm. Paradigm. I used to say paradigm because I was hooked on phonics. It worked for me. Okay, some of you don't get this. Right? So paradigm. So this is a paradigm. So what you know you don't know, and your blind spots. Your paradigm. What is a paradigm? Your understanding, your perspective, the structure. Simply put, it is the way you see the world. The way you see the world. Your paradigm. Your paradigm is influenced by where you grew up, how you grew up, both geographically as well as who that constellation of family was right around you, or community, right? So all those things add to your paradigm. And so who had the primary responsibility of introducing you to a paradigm? Your parents, your family, those people who were raising you, right? Guardians. And where did they get their paradigm? from their parents in life history. And where do they get their paradigm? Have you ever got a copy of 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 a copy? Does that 10th generation of the copy look exactly like the original? No. Why? Things change. Things change. And so oftentimes we're operating with paradigms that were given to us, and we haven't recognized that things have changed. There's 3 generations of women cooking a holiday meal. And there's a daughter, a mother, and a grandmother. So the mother's in there cutting this turkey in half. And the daughter comes in there just upset. She's like, Mom, why are you cutting this turkey in half? What are you doing? And the mother says, I'm doing it because it tenderizes the meat. She's coming up with these really lame excuses. And the daughter, really confronts her. And so the mother gets upset and she says, just go ask your grandmother why I'm doing it, right? So the daughter goes to the grandmother and says, Grandma, Mom is in there cutting the turkey in half. She's like, no, she isn't. She's like, yes, she is. And the grandmother goes, ah. And the daughter says, she told me to ask you why she's cutting it in half. And the grandmother said, she's cutting it in half because I used to cut it in half. Now, the granddaughter's really confused because she's like, why is it our family tradition to cut the turkey in half? And the grandmother looked at her and she said, baby, I had to cut the turkey in half because that's the only way it would fit in the oven. So now the daughter is replicating something outside of the context, not recognizing why it was done in the first place. And so when we don't look at these commonalities and differences, we oftentimes can operate like that. So let's open up your handout to the full poster. And letter 8, because what is at stake? What is at stake is the most valuable, non-renewable resource on the planet. And what is that? What is the most valuable, non-renewable resource on the planet? You. There will never be another you. In my case, people are like, thank God, we couldn't take many more, right? Yeah, you. And so there are systems, there are nations, there are religious affiliations that have been generated to harness the power of you. And so when I think about the human soul, I reflect back on the death of my grandmother. I love my grandmother. She was my best friend growing up. Our birthdays were 7 days apart. Spent every Saturday I could with her. She took me to organ lessons. I hated them, but I went because my grandmother took me. Love my grandmother. And when she passed, it hurt. It hurt. But we have some weird traditions in our family. Our family might be a little odd, and maybe your family is odd like ours. So what we did was, when my grandmother passed, they put her in an outfit that she would never have worn. They gave her the space paint stuff that she would never, that didn't even look like her, right? And they actually put her best wig on properly. It was not right? And so and then we stuff her in this box, and we put the box in the front of the room, and we have people come and pay their respects. And so some people are saying things to my grandmother. Other people are passing notes to my grandmother. And then you have that one strange family member who wants to touch the body. And I'm like, Grandma didn't want you touching her while she's alive. You're not doing it now. Right? But as they're paying tribute to my grandmother, how is she responding? She's not. Why? Because that's not my grandmother. So when the body becomes void of the spirit, the body becomes a thing. The body becomes a thing. And so afterwards, we would go to her house, and we had a spaghetti dinner, and people got the photo albums, and they're telling stories about my grandmother. They're telling lies about my grandmother. And it feels like she's there, but she can't animate anything. And so when the spirit is without a body, the spirit becomes powerless. Right? It becomes powerless. And so when I think about the harnessing of the human soul, there are systems designed to crack the human soul, to turn a human being into a thing. Poverty is designed to crack the human soul, turn a human being from a human being to a thing. You ever notice that we always talk about people in poverty, or we talk about we talk about the people, but we never talk about the system that's creating their response to poverty. It's always their fault, right? I oftentimes wonder. So growing up, I saw the original Roots series. Did anyone watch that in the 80s, right? And it always fascinated me why. So the opening scene, and I don't want to be too graphic, and so I hope I'm not triggering anything for anybody. But one of the opening scenes is where they captured a young African boy by the name of Kunta Kinte, and they're conditioning him for the system of slavery, right? They're conditioning him, and so they tie him up and they hit him, and he screeches, and the man asks, "What is your name?" And he says, "My name is Kunta Kinte." And the man says, "No, your name's not Kunta Kinte. Your name is Toby." And he hits him. Right? And this continues and continues until they're both exhausted. Until finally, the young man, the guy asks him, he says, "Well, what is your name?" And he says, in exhaustion and total depletion, "My name is Toby." What happened? They broke his spirit, turned him into a thing. Now, I also recognize that system, that evil economic system tried to do that, but didn't accomplish its goals, right? Because people rose up and still had lives, married, had children, had relationships, had a spiritual encounter with a God they couldn't see, right? And so their humanity was still intact, but the system was designed to try to separate that. And so what are some of the barriers to our own humanity? Historical trauma is a barrier to our humanity, constantly trying to crack us and turn us into a thing. Right? Historical trauma is all that stuff that happened to everybody before you came and the same stuff you feel today. Historical trauma. This idea of institutional racism. Institutional racism tries to crack the human soul, turn people into things, that we only see them in one dimension, right? Institutional racism basically could be all those institutions that were set up before 1964. Any institution that was set up before technically could be a racist institution, right? This idea of poverty, and then also whiteness. Whiteness is problematic. The concept of whiteness is problematic. Because what's the hinging point of whiteness? How does whiteness work? Through privilege? I don't know about that. Because I know some white folks who don't feel like they have privilege. Right? How does whiteness work?
Contradiction to the not white.
It's the contradiction to the not white. Now here's the interesting thing about whiteness. The way whiteness works is that it makes an assumption that all white people are created equal. But if you talk to white people, they will tell you that all white people are not created equal. What do white people call white people who don't measure up to the level of sophistication that other white people think that they should? They call them white trash. They call them hillbillies. They call them rednecks, right? So even in that concept of it's dividing and trying to conquer, even in a so-called similar group of people, dismantling their humanity. So when we talk about this idea of diversity, we talk about these commonalities, and we talk about these differences. So if we go over to letter D, what do you notice about those shapes? At letter D. They are the same and they are different. Which shape is the right shape? Which shape is the good shape?
Depends on your definition of good.
Right? So when we talk about this, the complexity of this diversity stuff, when we use words like that, good and right and blah, 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 we need to ask ourselves, what is our definition for that? What is our goal for that definition? At letter E, we talk about this idea of equality versus equity. And the first picture there is equality. Everybody gets the same thing. But equity suggests what? Everyone gets what they need. They get what they need. Anyone been to the CHS Stadium? Right? Okay. So CHS, and I picked that stadium out specifically. Anyone been to Twins games, Metrodome, or even high school football games, right? So what's the restroom setup in those establishments? How are they usually set up? What's the restroom?
Same number of men and women.
Same number of men and women's restrooms, right? What's that experience like for
Long lines for women.
long lines for women, no lines for guys, and we won't talk about why. What we know is that men and women use restrooms differently. They use restrooms. That's equality. How's that experience for both of us? Women do dances. You know, I actually found out why women take so long. Because they're writing letters. Yeah. In the stalls, guys, there are these little mailboxes. Bad joke, bad joke. No, men and women use restrooms differently. They use them differently, right? So this is what the CHS Stadium did. Because typically what happens is women spend a really long time in line. Guys are in and out relatively quickly, and the guys are just kind of standing around, milling around, and then complaining about why the women, took so long, right? So CHS Stadium said, you know what, we're going to do something different. We're going to create an unfair system, and it's going to be unfair. So what they did was they created 2 women's restrooms for every 1 male restroom.
That's not fair.
It's not fair. But what? But it works. But it works. Now, when we talk about diversity stuff, and people go to this all the time, and I just think it's so interesting that they go here, because people go to that fairness spot, right? They say this isn't fair, blah 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 blah. It's not fair. This group and that group and that is not fair. What did your parents tell you about fair? Right? So why are we barking over this stuff? Right? One of the things I think is so interesting is a lot of times we spend so much time fighting against some stuff that if we just said, okay, maybe it is true. Now what? Let's move on, right? Let's move together. Then we have a lot of problems solved. But that's just me and my crazy ideas. So let's move on to letter C. I want to do this really quickly, so I leave you with some stuff to think about. So letter C is a chart, a graph, and at the top of that chart or graph are some categories that we use to kind of break people up in the United States. The first is African American. The second is European American. The third is Latina American, Asian American, Disabled American, and Native American. What I want you to do is I want you to tell me what the groups on the left taught you about the groups that go across the top. So what did parents and family teach you? What did friends? What did school and workplace, TV, movies, and media, and from your personal experience? But I want you to do it in a particular kind of way. If you learn something positive from those groups on the left about the groups across the top, I want you to put a plus. If you learn something negative, I want you to put a minus. If it's never anything that you talked about, I want you to put a 0. So you'll have pluses, minuses, and zeros. And you can have pluses and minuses in the same box, but the size of your plus and the size of your minus talk about how much you learn. So a big plus means a lot of positive, and a little bit of, a little negative means you learned a little bit of negativity. All right? So I'll give you just a couple of minutes to do that. Pluses, minuses, and zeros. Pluses, minuses, and zeros. We got one more minute. All right, stop. What I'd like for you to do is to get in groups of no larger than 3, groups of 2, but no larger than 3, and just talk about your pluses and minuses and your zeros. Feel free to share what you want. You don't have to share what you don't want. All right? So feel free to share pluses, minuses, and zeros. 1 minute, 1 minute. Four, three, two, Does anybody know the next lyric was your fingertips? I'm trying hard not to show it. But baby, okay, Ray Campbell died. I was sad. Very sad. Very sad. Glenn Campbell died. So this is something. So I was at a session and I started singing some songs and people were like, "How old are you?" and then they were like, "How do you know those songs?" So my grandmother was Methodist and devout Methodist. I mean, devout. And so there was this new invention called FM radio. And my grandmother thought that was the devil. She was like, because they play all that worldly music on, and she's a good Methodist, right? So as a kid, she would buy us AM radio so we could listen to the what she called the Cincinnati Redlegs. That's what she called the Cincinnati Reds. And so she bought us these AM radios because she didn't want the devil's music playing on the FM radio. What my grandmother did not know was that Dr. Ruth Lessinger was only on AM radio. So it didn't work. It didn't work. All right. So pluses, minuses, and zeros. I don't need to know what your pluses, minuses, and zeros were, but I am interested in your discovery as you were creating that document for yourself, as you were filling that out. Were there any things that you discovered or things that you thought about as you were going through that exercise? Yes.
Well, I could have two things that came to mind. My dad was in World War II in the Navy, and so he was fighting against the Japanese. And later in life, I went over to Japan with a crew of American carpenters from Minnesota, and I asked my dad, so do you have any advice for me? we just try to get along, with good people, but just go over to it. And then we got over there, and the Japanese guy that was in the apartment below our crew was actually a survivor as a baby of the bombing in Nagasaki.
Wow.
Yeah, his mother fell on him, and that's how he survived. His mom and his sister died.
Wow.
And that particular Japanese guy took in all of our carpenters, had us in for dinners. He just was a friend to us the whole time we were in Japan, and he even loaned the carpenters that I had over his motorcycle to go out and use it on the weekends. So it's that's what came to mind, just the love and forgiveness of my dad that I fight these guys.
Yeah.
And then going over there and getting the other side of it where, this man shouldn't be filled with hate, but instead he was just full of love.
Yeah.
And so that's what came to mind.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. Other folks, what came to mind as you were?
Mine was just how change occurs, because the picture that I have from family and friends is when I was very young. And then the other ones have progressed, but just how different society and how much progress has happened from when I was a youth to where I'm at now. And the message of nothing ever stays the same.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to kind of change with it.
So you saw a progression and you've
Sure.
kind of changed with that progression yourself. All right. Cool. Other folks, what came to mind? Yes.
Mine's the opposite.
All right.
I grew up in a very, I think, open and positive family in terms of looking at a variety of people. And as I grew up and got out into the world, I saw a lot of negative perspectives in terms of diversity. So mine was the opposite.
So yours was the opposite, given where you came from an environment that was very accepting, but then when you walked out into the world, you saw something different from the world.
Yeah, I felt very naive.
Very naive. Yeah.
Still
Hey.
Well, mine is, I'm originally from the South, so grew up single parent mom, and everything was divided. There was a white community on one side, black community on the other side, and we was taught to stay away from white folks. And I grew up with that. And then as I continued to, when I moved here, it was a different commonality, as you talked about, the sense of stay learning and talking to people, meeting new people. So I changed as I got older. But when I see that, and I wrote down what my experiences is, it brought back memories of that trauma, of what I experienced as a young man living in the South. Having a cross burned in front of my yard, because no one there was in the neighborhood. So all of that trauma comes back, and that's what I saw and experienced when I was done.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for sharing that. I think one of the things we also have to do is, and sometimes this is difficult, when we hear people tell their stories and it's something that's not a part of our experience, just listen to their story. Whether you can identify or agree with it or whatever, just listen, right? Which is important. So I appreciate you doing that on this very sensitive topic. I don't need to know where you have zeros, but did anyone have zeros on their charts at all? Yeah, yeah. Our parents did the best they could with what they had to raise us. And if your parents were anything like mine, and I think my parents did a reasonably good job, it was inadequate for the challenges I had to face. It's inadequate. My parents could have never taught me about sexting. Using the phone to show pictures and all. They could have never taught me about that. Why could my parents have never taught me about that? It didn't exist when but they gave me principles on how to live and how to think about myself that transcends whatever comes up next, right? So your parents did the best they could with what they had to raise you, and it was going to come up short because they didn't know what kind of world you were going to be. And it's also funny, people said this to me, and I found myself saying it until I realized it was a goofy thing to say. We ask young people, what do you want to be when you grow up? Has anyone ever heard someone say that or been asked, right? Have you ever asked the person who asked you, well, what do you want to be when you grow up, right? Because usually those people still say, well, I'm not sure what I want to, you know. So a better question is, how do you want to be when you grow up? What kind of person do you want to be, right? So our parents did the best they could with what they had. And so some of us have zeros in places, and we have an emotion about those zeros. Or we may have minuses about in a section, and we may have feelings about those minuses. But cut those people a break because they gave you their best. And it was going to be inadequate. And so the blind spots that they gave you, the paradigms that they gave you, are those your fault? No, they're not your fault. But they are now your responsibility. Anybody drive a car? Ridden in a car? Does that vehicle have blind spots? Oh, yeah. Somebody said, oh, yeah. And where are they? So they're on like right on the quarter panels, on the back. You know, somebody got smart ones that said underneath. Right? Yeah. And if you drive a Hummer, the whole thing is a blind spot, right? Blind spot. But those aren't your fault. But they are your responsibility. And so context is everything. Context is everything. Context is the environment by which we developed. And so if I developed on a farm, I have a certain kind of concept. If I grew up in a city, I have a certain kind of paradigm. If I grew up in a suburban area, I have a certain kind of paradigm. And those things aren't my fault, but they are my responsibility to take note of. And my behavior drives towards my goals. So I have to be sure what my goals are, particularly around this idea of commonalities and differences. If we go down to letter F, just really quick, I like this kind of metaphor, or this diagram of culture. I think it's very helpful to me. It was helpful to me when I was trying to think about how to talk about culture. So let's think of culture as a carrot. There's the top of the carrot, and then what's the bottom called? The root, right? Okay, the root, or the butt, okay, the root. Or what, as my grandmother would say, the root. So the root, right? So the top and the root. And what does the top do for the root? What's its responsibility to the root? Absorb sunlight, right? And feed it to the root. And what is the root's responsibility to the top? Yep, to get water from the ground, nutrients, and grow the top, right? So they have a symbiotic relationship. They need each other to survive. And so what I would suggest to you is that the top of the carrot, the part that we can see, we can call that an artifact of culture. So things that we can see about a culture. So give me some examples of things you can see about different cultures.
Dress.
How they dress. How they talk. Their religion. What else can you see? The way they carry themselves, right? Their food. You can see their food. How they treat one another. Their music. Their art. Right? Those are all things that we can see. And we will call those things artifacts. All right? So those are cultural artifacts. But what's underneath the green part of, what's underneath the green? The root. And so we will call that values. Right? So when I see an artifact, what is it a physical manifestation of? Values. So I used to be the pull up your pants police. Anybody seen those kids sagging? Those people, right? Yeah. I was writing tickets. I got good at it too. I was writing people tickets, pull up your pants, pull up your pants, all in the school. And then I started doing it out in the community. You know? Oddly enough, people actually did pull up their pants. It was really weird. You know, they're like, hey. And then they're like, pull up their pants, right? What's that? I said, not had anybody pull them down. No, I don't touch other people's pants as a rule. Yeah, I know, and I don't even get tempted, man. So we need to talk. We need to talk. But at any rate, so So at any rate, so I used to do that, right? So I used to get on my students, pull up your pants, until I realized something. There might be times that they need to have their pants pulled down. Can you imagine living in an environment where everybody has their pants pulled down and then all of a sudden you start pulling your pants up? You stick out like a sore thumb. Context is everything. So then I started teaching my students there may be some situations that you may want to decide to pull your pants up. Like job interviews. Workplaces that you want people to see you in a particular kind of way. So no, you can have your pants however you want to have them when you're at home, when you're in the neighborhood. But if you want to be successful, this may be something you want to consider. Right? No promises, but something you might want to consider. The same thing goes for us. Oftentimes, these when we see artifacts, we don't recognize that they're associated with values. So why were kids sagging their pants? Because they wanted to defy me or whatever, blah, blah, blah. That's about me. That's not about them. They were looking for safety, significance, and belonging, and they thought that sagging their pants was going to get it to them. So what artifacts do we have that we hold on to that are demonstrations of our values? A hijab, head covering, scarf. Outside of being a good fashion statement, is a statement of values. Your lanyard, because everybody doesn't get those things, is a statement of values. When people talk about interacting with you, what do they call your name or do they call your organization's name when they talk to other people about their interactions with you? You are a statement of values. You're a statement of values. And when artifacts get detached from their values, that's when we have stereotypes. You ever thought about a stereotype and said, well, isn't that true a little bit about that group? Don't they dance well? And aren't they drunks? And can't they not jump? The problem with that, the problem with the stereotype is that you've taken an artifact and you've disconnected it from the value. Right? You've disconnected it from the value. And what happens when we don't have artifacts? We can't find our culture. We can't find our value. Now, any Lutherans here? Please raise your hand if you're Lutheran. Okay. What's the lace cookie? That's kind of like it's a lace cookie usually made around Christmas time. I'm not sure if it's Norwegian or Swedish. A rosette, right? Anybody make rosettes? All right. Anybody have folk food that you make around the holidays? From a grandma's recipe, great grandma's recipe. Raise your hand if you do anything like that. Okay, cool. All right. So wouldn't it be cheaper to just go to the store and buy it? Wouldn't it be easier to just buy it? It'd be easier, but it's not the same. So is it about the recipe? It's way more than the recipe. Way more than the recipe, right? It's about the culture. And so when I see this disconnection between stereotypes and their values, I see a couple of places. I see a place called Ellis Island, disconnecting people from their values, artifacts. People couldn't bring everything across the boat. And then when they got to Ellis Island, they had people who either weren't educated enough or people made their own decision that I need to be American, so I'm going to leave all that other stuff and become this other thing, right? Refugee camps, another place where people get disconnected from their values and their artifacts, can't bring everything with, right? The economic system of slavery disconnected people from their original roots. Where are you from? I don't know. Important stuff. And so when we get to letter G, in this last 5 minutes that I have, I really want to talk about these three concepts because I think they're pertinent to number H, which is what we're dealing with right now. We're dealing with this right now. Bigotry, prejudice, and discrimination. And originally, I thought that bigots suffered from ignorance. Anyone ever heard someone say that a bigot is ignorant? Anyone ever heard? Right. So Archie Bunker is the kind of quintessential American bigot kind of stuff. Michael from The Office, that guy, he was a version. Michael Scott was a version of that. Family Guy is kind of a version of that. You know, all this kind of stuff. But people always taught me that bigots lacked information or lacked knowledge. So as an educator, I know how to deal with that. So I would give bigots information. The statistics say, and the bigots would say, that's not what that says because it's this. And I would say, no, it's like this. No, it's like this. And we go back and forth until finally the bigot would be so frustrated that they would tell me what their problem was. They would say, Andre, I don't care what you say. This is how I feel. Oh, bigotry is not about knowledge. It's about an emotional state. And how do you help someone change their emotions? You love them. What? I'm supposed to love a bigot? Exactly. Because good people will say goofy stuff like this, right? They'll say, you know, my so-and-so family member is a bigot, so I cut them off. Do they get better because you cut them off? No, they go off and find other folks and they start breeding this insanity and multiplying, right? There's a story that I'm embarrassed to tell, but I'll tell it. So my senior year of high school, I got a name, and so I was on Facebook, and dude pinged me, and I hadn't seen him. He was in my algebra class, and he said, "Andre." I was like, "Oh yeah," you know. He's like, "Andre Koen." I was like, "Yeah," you know. He was like, "Fish boy." Yeah. See, I had a bad habit of we did everything in the kitchen, so I had a bad habit of laying out my clothes in the kitchen. So that's where our ironing board was, right? So I would iron my clothes before I went to school. Well, Thursday night, my mom fried fish. So Friday morning algebra class, I had a problem. And what was my problem? I smelled like fish. And why did I smell like fish? Because my clothes had close proximity to where fish was being cooked. So I'm going to ask you a question, and after you laugh, I want you to think about the ramifications of the question. What do the people around you smell like? Do they smell good like you? So how do we change bigotry? We love bigots. We latch on to them. I'm not saying you take disrespect. I'm not saying that you so I have 2 Great Danes. I have one now. It's a long story. But I keep them on a leash when I take them out, on a tether. And sometimes the tether's real long. But then when I'm around other dogs or people that I don't know, I know my dogs, but I don't know what they'll do. So I bring that tether real close, and I keep them real close to me because we're connected. And so when we talk about bigoted people, I'm not saying that you have to keep them tethered. Prejudice is a frozen mindset. And so how do you help someone change their mind? How do you do it? Love, okay. You show them another way. Relationship. Ask, what's that? Be a good example. I simply say ask questions, right? I no longer talk to teenagers. It's a waste of my time to talk to teenagers, right? Because they usually don't say, They don't usually say much, but I ask lots of questions. And the funny thing is, as I'm asking these questions, the teenagers will be like, after a while, stop asking me questions. Why? Because it's working. It's working, right? So prejudiced people typically have a frozen way of thinking or seeing the world, right? And so you start asking questions. Are there books that can give me that perspective that you're just watching? Is there another news channel that I can hear the same exact thing that you're doing? What did you read this information about those particular groups and blah, blah, blah? You start doing that to a prejudiced person, they start melting down. And they're like, oh, I don't know. Danger, Will Robinson, danger. You know, you just dismantle their whole world, right? So prejudice is a frozen mindset. So to thaw that mind, ask critical questions. And then lastly, we know that discrimination is a behavior, right? And that the law said it will deal with those behaviors. And so if the law will deal with discrimination, one of the things that we know that human behavior is emotions plus thoughts equals our behavior, right? So if discrimination is a behavior and the government said they will handle that, who's responsible for emotions and thoughts? We are. We're in our current situation because we haven't been doing our job. And what is our job? To love human beings to wholeness. To love them to wholeness. Because there are lots of things in letter H that are trying to drive a wedge between the body and the spirit, trying to drive a wedge into the human psyche. And there's a little monster that's excited about that wedge, about driving a wedge between those two parts. And that little monster is called free market capitalism. Have you ever watched a commercial that made you feel better about yourself because you watched the commercial? Very rarely does that happen. More often than not, they're telling us about how inadequate we are without their product. But can I buy enough to heal or fill the hole in my soul? Can I buy enough? Can I drink enough? Can I smoke enough? Can I go enough places? I certainly would say that Robin Williams has demonstrated to us that that doesn't work. Prince has demonstrated to us that that doesn't work. Philip Seymour Hoffman has demonstrated to us that it doesn't work. So what does work? Building relationships between human beings, looking at our commonalities and our differences. Just letter I, and I'm done. So how do we get to a point of liberation? We've tried having people on the top and then the people on the bottom, and we said, you know what, let's flip those roles. Let's put the people on the top and switch the people on the bottom. And then we said, you know what, let's all get on top of the table. And then we said, you know what, we're going to have separate but equal. You have your side of the table, and we'll have our side of the table. And then we said, you know what, can't we just all get along? Let's all get on the same side of the table. But all along, what has been the problem? The table. And so until we're able to look at our commonalities and differences as strengths, we will continually be used by the table to do all sorts of acrobatics. And so ultimately, it's our responsibility as human beings to continue the legacy that is community action, which is giving people the dignity and honor and being human. Dignity is both something you can import and something you export. Honor is the highest level of respect. Being recognizes that I didn't bring myself here and I'm trying to figure it out just like you. And human is an adjective that describes the noun. So how do we want to be described as human beings? How do we want to be described as employees of TriCap? What do we want our legacy to be? Because nobody gets out of this alive. My name is Andre Koen. Thank you so much for your time.